This story is based on a true event. Many years ago, my family and I lived in this old two-story house that was built in the early 1900s. There were tall windows in all the living spaces, including the bedrooms. I slept on the second floor and had a room all to myself. Usually, at night, I wouldn't use the blinds since my room was at least 40 feet from the ground. So, I wasn't concerned about anyone peeking into my room. One stormy winter night, I was awakened by the loud rain splashing on the windows. Since I rarely used the window blinds, there was a fair amount of natural light in my room. I remembered laying on my bed, with my body facing up, looking at the window. I momentarily watched the rain splash and pound against the glass before deciding to go back to sleep. As I lay in bed with my eyes closed, I heard what sounded like someone knocking on the window. I initially ignored it because I knew no one could knock on my window since my bedroom was so high up from the ground. The knocking eventually stopped, and a moment later, I could hear what sounded like someone tapping on glass. At this point, I was spooked and decided to slightly open my eyes to see what could be causing the sounds. I stared at the window where the sound came from, but all I saw was the rain splashing against it. There was no sign of anyone tapping, but I could still hear it. I convinced myself it was nothing, probably just the rainwater dropping from the roof, causing the tapping sound. After coming to that conclusion, I calmed down, closed my eyes, and prepared myself to sleep again. As I was about to fall asleep, the tapping stopped, and I heard a loud thump as if someone wearing heavy boots had just stepped into my room. Hearing this spooked me again, so I slightly opened my eyes to check for the source. This time, it wasn't the rain that I saw. Instead, a tall, shadowy figure was standing by the window in my room. Its silhouette blocked almost the whole window, and I could see it standing in front of me motionless. Whatever it was at least 7 to 8 feet tall, wearing a long trench coat along with what seemed to be a cattleman hat. The moment I saw it, I was terrified to death. I was so scared that my first reaction was to close my eyes as tightly as possible and pretend I was still asleep. The tapping continued and seemed to get louder and louder as if it was coming closer to me. I balled up my fists and told myself that if that shadowy figure touched me, I would hit it as hard as possible. I waited for what felt like an eternity before daring to open my eyes to see if it was still around. As I looked around the room, I noticed the man was gone. Upon realizing this, I quickly got up, turned on the lights, and rushed towards the window to pull down the blind. As I approached the window, I noticed that the floor was wet where the man was standing and water droplets were nearby. I quickly pulled down the blind and returned to bed, leaving the lights on. I was so terrified by the experience, I barely slept that night. Little did I know, this was the start of a series of encounters I would have with who I call the Shadow Man.